Hello, my name is Erica Reed, and today I will be discussing with you the movie The Hours and Virginia Woolf. The movie The Hours is based on the life of Virginia Woolf. It doesn't show you exactly how her life went, but it does show you a time of her life where she was dealing with depression. I would say that Virginia, I would diagnose her with major depressive disorder. I say that she struggled from major depressive disorder just really due to the symptoms that she showed in the movie. I did read in one article that she possibly suffered from bipolar disorder. However, with bipolar disorder, there are major highs and lows. And so, based on the movie, I didn't really see where she was suffering major highs and lows. Now, I would say that she does have major depressive disorder with some psychotic features because she did speak about hearing voices. And so with hearing voices, of course, we would have to add that particular feature. I wouldn't say I would rule out schizophrenia because, there were really not really any hallucinations or delusions or anything like that. So that is why I would rule out again bipolar because there were no highs and lows, and schizophrenia. I would also rule out substance and medication induced depressive disorder, and that is because I didn't see her, abusing any type of drugs or alcohol or anything like that, or abusing any sort of medication that would cause her to become depressed. I will say that her depression was brought on by a lot of traumatic experiences that she had in her life. I did read that she experienced a lot of death growing up. She lost her mother at an early age, and then after losing her mother, 2 years after losing her mother, she lost her half sister. And then when she was in her early 20s, she lost her father, she lost her half brother. So she had a lot of major losses that would understandably be the onset of major depressive disorder. Virginia, she, with major depressive disorder, someone, they would lose interest in really their daily activities. She really didn't do anything. She wasn't social. You'll see in the movie that she wasn't eating. She didn't really eat. Her husband had to check behind her to make sure that she ate, and he had to, encourage her to eat. She wasn't really sleeping. She described her night's rest as uneventful. So, that just goes to show that, she wasn't sleeping, maybe possibly having insomnia. I didn't see that she was really energetic, so probably having a loss of energy. So all of these things I felt are diagnostic criteria for major depressive disorder. I also observed where she really had feelings of worthlessness. She felt as though she wasn't really adding to her husband's life. She pretty much felt that he would be better off without her. Just really due to, him having to take care of her, and she felt like, he would be able to work without her being around, taking care of her. So she wanted to, just free him of that. And so she also wanted to free herself of the pain and the anguish that she felt from suffering with depression. So in the movie, Virginia introduces us as a writer of Mrs. Dalloway. She introduces us to two characters, and that is Laura Brown and Clarissa Vaughn. In the movie, you see that Laura Brown, she's a mother. She has I would call a Stepford Wives type of life. She had a perfect life. She had a husband who loved her very much. She, had a son, and at that time she was about maybe 4 or 5 months pregnant. But from what it seemed, she had a really good life. But she wasn't really happy with her life. At a point in the movie, it shows where Laura eventually went to a hotel, and she went there to commit suicide. And so there was a point where, there were some bottles of medication laying next to her, implying that she took the medication or was going to take the medication, but she fell asleep and woke up and decided that like she couldn't go through with it. And so from her own words, she chose life instead of death. In the movie, you see that Laura Brown has a son, and his name is Richard. So later on, you see where Richard suffers from AIDS, and I would say he also suffered from depression. And I think that the movie shows how depression can be passed along from one generation to the next. And in the movie, I would say that Richard, his was probably, of course, passed along genetically, but also it was, I say it could have been induced by his mental, I'm sorry, not mental, but medical issues with dealing with AIDS and the different medications that he had to take. And in the movie, it shows where he is taking a number of medications. And so I think that that is a clear depiction that, medications can be, cause an onset of depression. Laura, she, ended up abandoning her family and moving to Canada. And so, she spoke about, choosing life over death, but in her choosing life, she felt as though she had to abandon her family in order to be happy and, in order for her to live. And so it came at a cost of, leaving her son. And, they had a strained relationship, and ultimately her son Richard ended up committing suicide. He, pushed himself or fell out of, sat on the windowsill and fell out of the window. But, in the movie, he felt as though, he was worthless. He really didn't see the value in his life, even though he was, a successful writer and poet. His friend Clarissa, who took care of him and, really cared and loved him, and actually they were in a relationship, but things ended up, breaking off. But it never, I believe it never changed how they felt about each other. But again, he felt as though that he was only living for her, and he didn't really feel that he was living for himself. And ultimately, he ended up committing suicide. But like I said, Virginia, who was the writer of this book, Mrs. Dalloway, and who is the main character of the movie, she suffers from, as I stated, I would diagnose her with major depressive disorder. And I would just really think that in the movie they showed how it truly affects the whole family. It doesn't affect just one person. It affects everybody in the family. And so I think that Virginia, again, you know, she is a clear example of what depression looks like.